Hey, folks, welcome to Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee. Hashtag Idiotic is brought to you by the team here at Domino, makers of Domino One, helping L&D teams to develop, scale, and deliver learning that maximizes employee value. Folks, we have Mo Poirier joining us here today. Mo, hey, it's your first time joining us, so introduce yourself to our gang.
Yeah, right on. Thanks, Chris. I'm founding partner of a boutique shop called Shift Facilitation, and we are experts in facilitation skills training and on a mission, right, to elevate the work that facilitators do in training rooms, meeting rooms, and that might stretch sometimes, right? Where do facilitators show up is a great question too.
Yeah. So we're using that word facilitation and that other word facilitator. Let's start there because I think most people think of training as a trainer at the front of the room or an
Right.
instructor. But in our space, we do often have that word facilitator and facilitation. So talk us through a little bit about facilitation versus maybe the more traditional understanding of a trainer, for instance, standing in the front of the room.
Yeah, right on. The simplest way into that conversation is the direction, the flow of the conversation and how that's happening. I think we would essentially say a trainer is imparting, is transferring wisdom, experience, expertise. So we typically frame that as a one-way conversation. If we add facilitation, then there's an exchange. It's bi-directional. So now we have two-way conversations. The facilitator becomes a host for a conversation that invites many voices into the training room. And I would also say, it's a huge bias of mine, a facilitator may not be the expert. It's possible that the people in the room have the expertise and we're trying to figure out how to move forward to solve a problem, let's say, or work through some challenge or issue.
Right on, right on. A thought just popped into my head as you were talking about that. And I know back in the earliest days already of my time in this space, the phrase that was going around was the moving away from the sage on the stage. I
Yeah,
haven't thought of that in 20 years, but anyway.
yeah. What was it? I mean, early days, right? Was it Bob Pike's book, like Training Ain't Telling?
Okay.
So, there were early so I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here, Chris. This isn't the first time we're talking about this for sure.
No, it has been a thing for a while, that's for sure. And let's just go a little bit down, how did you get into this space? What's your origin story?
Oh my God. Okay, great. So I'm an engineer and I'm Canadian, graduated from a Canadian engineering school. I'm an electrical engineer with a management degree. Got a pinky ring to prove that. The iron ring story is a uniquely Canadian thing for engineers. And what happened for me? Yeah, third year of engineering school, I started a summer camp for kids teaching science, engineering, technology. So we would take kids out onto the football field and launch water balloons with surgical tubing, talk about projectile motion, acceleration, deceleration, draw graphs and curves to map the path. And that just lit me up. Now I'm leading an experiential learning program, and that's the origin story. That was the very beginning for me.
Very cool. Yeah. And that's a very different one than many folks in our space were. Well, I was working on this project and I knew the most, so they asked me to be the trainer, and it turned out I kind of liked that work and I really found it satisfying, and that's how I end up into that space. Right on. And water balloons. I don't think anyone's ever gotten into our space with water, or I've heard that anyway, anyone's gotten into our space with water balloons before. So
Yeah. Well,
right on.
and this was just down the 417, Highway 417, because I was at Ottawa U.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the engineering building.
Explain the reference. Domino is headquartered in Ottawa. The 417 is the major freeway that runs, sort of bisects the city, and et cetera. Yeah. And you were also identifying your Canadianness earlier with your moose mug.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Cheers.
So you've been doing this for a while, and I don't mean that to feel harsh, because I've been doing this for a while too. Openly admit that, but you've been working on a pretty special project, and that project actually is being published not too long from now by ATD Press. You've put together a book called The 5 Personas of Facilitation.
Mhm.
And so Where did the idea for the book come from, or what was its kind of origin story, or when did it start coming together for you? What brought it about?
Yeah. So we're working on a massive national project. We're rolling out leadership programs at Tim Hortons. So another Canadian classic story, our coffee and donut shop, right? And so we're training leaders in the stores, in the quick serve restaurants. And what we have is a team of 30 facilitators who are spreading out across the country to deliver the programs. And there's 6 modules, and we've got a year to get it done. So what happens is they come all together, right? And a company based in Guelph called Eagles Flight was running the program. And I was one of the lead coaches. So those facilitators would come in and we'd spend time learning the content. But by the time we got to the second, third module, they knew how to read a facilitator guide. They knew how to pick up the content and go through the motions, if you will, right? They got really good at that. But then a new layer emerged. It was, how are they showing up in the room to be a catalyst for the change in behavior that the program was trying to drive? And so in these coaching moments, sitting in the room as they're rehearsing and practicing with new content, now we're adding layers of, how do you bring emphasis to a key point that squeezes their hearts, if you will, right? Because getting buy-in is not a logical conclusion. Something else has to resonate in the room for people to say, hey, I get this, and I'm willing to make this change. So yeah, the genesis of the 5 personas was, how might we, right, asking this design question, how might we help facilitators figure out who they are and bring their unique presence and style and strengths and characteristics to the room to inspire that change?
And the book has a very specific title, The 5 Personas.
Right. Yeah.
It's not just some personas or various sorts of other less specific perspectives on it. So let's maybe jump into what those 5 personas are.
Yeah, you got it. I'll mention too, as we kick this off, it's the 5 personas is competency based. So we're building from the ATD capability model,
Oh,
the
okay.
Institute, right? The Institute for Performance and Learning, their professional competencies. So underneath this is the standards and the expectations that we expect for facilitators in a training room. All right, so here they are, right? The 5 personas are the sensei, the drill sergeant, the superhero, the confidant, and the jester. So now we've got these 5 archetypes, if you will, and they are portals. They give us access to what those underlying competencies and best practices are. So, hey, I'm a trainer. Guess what? I should be a subject matter expert and have some credibility in the room, Chris, right?
One would think.
One would think. So I need the sensei to show up, and how I use analogies, how I use stories, how I explain complicated models or the steps of a process. Think about teaching customer service reps the call flow, right, in a call center, and how critical that is, and helping them understand why, right, all of these steps are in the flow and not to skip steps. That's the work of the sensei. And we add this archetype of the sensei because there's deep respect when this, like, in the training room, that's what I want. I want deep respect and trust, and that indicates this connection and an exchange between the learners and the teacher.
Yeah, if you're standing in front of a room of folks and if you can't convince them that you are authentic and
Right.
About the topic, I can imagine standing in a room full of engineers and me with my English degree, we may have some bridge building to put in motion. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so now you've offered us another gift of insight, Chris, from the personas, because we start with examining ourselves as facilitators and where are my strengths and where can I develop and grow. And I take off my facilitator hat and I reach over here and I put on my learner or participant hat. And you've called out that there's an impact. So if my sensei isn't strong, I will lose the room. The impact for participants is the facilitator can't answer a basic question. And now respect is gone, trust is gone, and like I said, I'm losing the room.
Someone on LinkedIn has popped in, still sounding a bit like Sage on the stage versus learner-centered constructivist learning. But we have other personas that I think take us further away, maybe, or help amplify or take us in other directions than simply the Sage on the stage. But what you're mentioning here, it actually flags for me something that I've just realized, because coming in this conversation, I
Yeah.
kind of assumed that the 5 personas, you're going to figure out which one you are and you're in that persona. But am I understanding all 5 of these are things that we ought to be able to draw on and layer, as opposed to I am a sensei, or somebody else comes in and they are, the confidant or something like that? Or
Yeah. You got it. It's about balance. And again, if we go to the learner point of view, at different times, the participants in the room need different things from me in order for this to be a successful learning experience. So let's go to the drill sergeant. When we're running practice drills, when we're running activities and exercises in the room, again, remember that we've made an assumption here that this is an exchange-based learning environment. And we might even go to experiential learning, because the most valuable thing we can do in the training room when we're all together is practice and apply, right, the new skills we're learning. So we need the drill sergeant to give clear instructions and keep people safe, because they understand what they're expected to do. And the drill sergeant gives you encouragement when they see you jumping in and giving things a try. They also will help correct you gently to keep you on track.
Yeah, and I haven't thought about constructivism in a while,
Mhm.
but even that sort of learner-centric needs structure, right? You do need to make sure that folks stay on track. And even as you were mentioning, the sense of clarity, first of all, because that reduces the sense of being at risk. They know what they need to accomplish. They're not kind of
Right.
going, I don't know.
Right.
They can give them a clear target of what to try to achieve, or
Right.
what to go for.
Right.
And even just keeping folks on time.
Well, that's it. Like, poor instructions are a disservice to the participants, because now it's wasted energy on confusion, right? And trying to sort out what they're supposed to do. So let's keep the limited resources, the energy that they have, focused on productive work.
So sensei is your ability to establish authority and authenticity, and I don't, maybe authority sounds like sternness or whatever, but
Right.
having, I guess, instilling confidence that you are someone who can be trusted in this subject matter expert and is going to be beneficial standing in the room, not necessarily at the front of the room.
Yep.
With folks. You've got the drill sergeant who's, I mean, that does kind of evoke the movie's version of the drill sergeant shouting in someone's face, etc. But
Right.
I sense that you're leaning more into the keeping things on track, on task, structure, moving things along, etc. And I think probably very few of us would actually be standing in someone's face and yelling at them, "You
Yeah.
maggots!" I mean, unless it's an entomology program, in which case maybe calling people maggots is part of the activity. I don't know.
Oh, I love the playfulness. So you got it.
I mean, your 5th one's the jester, and I have a hunch that I'm strong
The-
in that. But anyway,
you-
we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, that's right. The drill sergeant is misunderstood. We're pulling from archetypes that are familiar. That makes the character, right, easy for us to appreciate and understand. However, there is a warning, and you're right. In the book, the story is about this really gentle and calm yoga instructor.
Mm.
Very clear instructions about what we're being asked to do, and corrections in my body position, helping me with my breathing. It's very supportive and productive in a gentle way. So we lose that aggression you talked about.
Yeah. I do have a class with a bunch of guys doing yoga based. It's not a pure yoga thing, but one of the things that the instructor though is a woman. And one of the things that I've noted in a couple of years that I've been going is just how she does that kind of explanation of what we're going to do next. And very often she knows the room well enough that she knows which activities we're what to do, where she throws in the alternate. You can't do the deep squat. Here's the alternate. And she says it almost every session. And part of your brain might say, well, we all know that. But by reinforcing it, she's giving you permission to do an alternate, et cetera, it seems to me. But she seems to do a very good job of understanding who's in the room and knowing so-and-so might have a problem in this area, got a bad knee. So, deep squat, let's do the alternate, or at least make sure that everyone understands there's permission to not be perfect for this particular activity. It's a real neat skill to watch.
Well, yeah, lovely. And that's the value of using personas, because then you can look out into the world and find examples, just as you did, where your own experience informs how you might support others.
Okay, so we've got the sensei. We've got the drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Who's number 3?
Number 3 is the superhero. So this is optimism and hope and possibility, the belief that we can make the world a better place. And that belief has to be present. That conviction, if you will, has to be present in the facilitator. And so that hopefulness, that positive energy, believing in the participants. And we've seen lots of studies that show when the teacher believes that the class are all A students, they outperform their peers. And so we bring that in through the superhero persona. And the other unique skill of the superhero is that they see potential in the room, and they will see superpowers in their learners often before the learners see it in themselves. And what a magical gift then, right? That belief that it's possible, that we can do it, and we can all improve. So then we go to Carol Dweck's work and we say, well, that brings in the growth mindset principles, right? Now we're starting to add some fuel with that thinking, that type of thinking.
So I, check back in with the LinkedIn user. Are we starting to sound a little less than sage on the stage and a little more towards learner-centric constructivist learning? Hey, gang, we're all on a journey here together.
Yeah.
That's where we're going.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anything further to understand about the superhero?
Yeah. Well, again, so we will play with, and so when we do this work with facilitators, we invite them to think about too much and not enough. So let's play with that just for a second.
Yeah.
The superhero is a great example. Too much superhero, and I don't know what the facilitator's on, but it scares me, right? It's like, it's out of touch with reality because it's rainbows and unicorns, and it's like, that's not my world, so I can't relate to that. On the other extreme, not enough superhero, and why bother? We give up because there's no hope, there's no possibility. So we like playing with those extremes because it really illustrates nicely how the personas contribute to the learner experience.
Rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah.
Well, on the one hand, rainbows does tie at least into your technical physics background, I guess, but unicorns, I think that leans a little bit maybe more towards my own English degree background. Flights of fancy. So the sensei, the drill sergeant, the superhero.
Yeah.
Who's next in our palette? Who's next in our cast of characters?
Number 4 is the confidant. And this persona is masterful at paying attention to the signals in the room. There's a connection, a relationship, empathy, psychological safety, emotional safety, even physical safety, so that we create a space where the learners feel seen, heard, valued. The confidant creates a sense of belonging and inclusion. They're counting the number of voices and keeping track of the quiet ones and finding some gentle spaces where those quieter ones can be invited in. And you've already hinted at it, even with the sensei and the drill sergeant. The confidant is very wisely meeting the participants where they are, because it's about relevance and understanding their world and some of the challenges they're facing. And Chris, I can imagine you've been in a training room that turned into a therapy session because for whatever reason, that's what the room needed. That's what the participants needed to be heard.
I would imagine sometimes like just the sense of change can
Right.
be the thing itself that the therapy session needs. I know early on in my time was doing training with our software in a group, and there was one person in the room who just, she was muttering under her breath, and this is stupid, and like literally I'm hearing this, it's not a big room, there's 12 of us,
Right.
and this and that, you know, and I'm under curse. And so I think then at the lunch break, because it was a full day session and there were like 3 full days going on of this. And so I checked in with the team leader and I said, this person help me understand or whatever. And he said, oh, she's someone who actually won't be doing the full work in the tool, in our case of making e-learning courses. She's part of the team that would write stuff and prepare stuff.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have a comfort level beyond, say, a Word document, for instance. So, and I went, oh, okay. And he did, I think, actually end up speaking to her and checking in. So like, you know, breathe or whatever. But once I understood that, then I had context to be able to put myself a bit in her shoes and go, okay, it's someone who feels really threatened, obviously, to the point where she's muttering under her breath and being resistant to things. So
people have a story appreciating that people arrive with best intentions. Like everyone wants to succeed. That's a pretty important underlying belief. You know, the confidant's response is, are you okay? Right? Because it comes from a place of care and concern for the people in the room.
Yeah.
And the listening skills and the like the ability to ask good, like, so inquiry-based learning, that's a strength of the confidant as well, because they're asking good questions that get conversation going in the room.
Right on. And sticking with this, maybe a practical thing, but as we've been talking about this, something that sort of popped onto my radar. So many times when I'm working with folks, there's someone who says, well, sorry, maybe it's a stupid question. And I mean, I try to say something, you're like, hey, no, there are no stupid questions. It's occurring to you. I want to know about it. But from the perspective of your personas, et cetera, because I think it's something we all encounter if we're doing this kind of situation. What strategies would you use in that kind of a case to, I guess, reassure or?
Yeah, let's name it again. Like you're pointing to a specific example, or you see this happening universally, right? People apologizing for asking questions and engaging. And that's a safety concern, right? Because I don't want you to feel embarrassed. I don't want you to feel like you have to hold back. And your words, no stupid questions. I hear facilitators use that phrase often. Thanks for the question, right? Simple, elegant, polite, gracious phrasing that doesn't have to be over the top. Like, so, hey, thanks for the question. I'm acknowledging that you took a risk by putting up your hand. I will name a question. Hey, that's a courageous question. Right? So name it. Hey, thanks for asking that question. I have a feeling everyone else in the room was thinking it, and I appreciate that you put up your hand to ask.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're probably not the only one thinking that. So
right. So
forward.
Create I might use that move intentionally, especially if I have some background on where the group is at on that change curve that you were describing just a second ago. Yeah.
I just added some extra skills to my quiver.
There we go.
Awesome.
Nice.
So the sensei, the drill sergeant, the superhero,
the
confidant, and then in walks Chris, the jester.
In walks Chris, the jester. Yeah, I've heard there are some things that I have a bias against. So I cringe at edutainment. I'm not in the entertainment business. That's not what I aspire to. However, there should be joy in the learning experience. We should be celebrating the fact that we are all here to get better at something. And so that joyfulness also becomes playfulness in the training room. The jester is the second most misunderstood, Chris. So you've called out the drill sergeant being misunderstood.
Mm.
The jester is also misunderstood. I don't need to be funny. That's not my job. In fact, in very serious training courses that have serious implications and consequences, I have no right to be telling jokes or trying to be funny. However, we can approach this topic with a sense of experimentation, with a sense of exploration, and we might even laugh at ourselves for some of the
Mm.
mistakes that we make along the way. And if we go back to impact on the participants, the right amount of jester invites risk taking, because as humans, we know that when we play, we optimize our learning DNA, right? Like now we're in a space where we can play and we can tear it down. It doesn't matter. It's okay. There's zero risk. And so in inviting participants into the room with that spirit is the jester's work. And if you're playful as the facilitator, your participants will reflect that back to you. I love that. And then historically, if we look at the jester character, they also have an important role to play to challenge assumptions, to challenge authority, to question things in the world that everybody just takes for granted. And that's a playful activity as well. The jester is making fun of the king,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. I mean, humor is very subjective. So you definitely have to have
Right.
had some measure of being the confident to be able to understand the room before you would even make a wisecrack about certain, you have to understand,
Right.
etc. But even in serious things, just often a little bit of humor can break a bit of stress, pull people in,
Right.
you know. So
Right. There's a reason why Shakespeare uses comic relief. It's so that we can deal with really heavy, important topics that need to be addressed.
right on. Whoa, LinkedIn user has popped back in. Actually, it still sounds a bit like the facilitator is the center of the learning experience versus being the guide to the learning experience. It may be that we're starting from two different origination points. Traditional instructional design versus learning experience design. Facilitator needs a presence for sure. Agree that they need to be a go-to for guidance and learners. Feel safe embarking on the journey. As far as answering questions, the LX facilitator would answer logistical questions, but for content-related questions, the facilitator should facilitate the group to answer, reinforcing the group's learning and engaging the formative assessment in the process. The inclusion of peer-to-peer learning reinforces learning and problem solving and addresses many learner questions. There's a lot, and thank you for chiming in with that.
Yeah.
It offers a great deal of insight and thoughtfulness for sure.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. What's been brought forward is very, very powerful. And I think, well, my thoughts about this are we're looking at a continuum. And so this design of the experience, yes, in a very traditional sense, the facilitator, trainer has the most knowledge about the subject that's being shared. In the other extreme on this continuum, the facilitator truly is a process guide. And we think about that. That also shows up in the definition of facilitator. So if we go to the body of knowledge in pure facilitation, I have zero subject matter expertise, and my role is entirely to guide the group towards an outcome. I do know about process. I do know about team dynamics. I am an expert at reading the room, and I have a back pocket full of what might we do next in order to help the group continue to progress towards the goal. And I love that. I think our user is naming that and calling it out. The personas still show up. The sensei is less teacher in that extreme where they're the process guide. However, the sensei is a master of team dynamics, of structures, of process, right? And the drill sergeant shows up because there's work to be done. The participants have something they need to achieve. So there's truth in what we're discussing.
Right on.
I'll share some data, Chris. We've had just under 1,000 facilitators take the online assessment, and the data shows that the jester consistently shows up as a strength the least. It's only 7% of the time.
Huh.
Now, I don't think that's because no one's a jester. I think that's because in corporate world, in the business world, it's a permission problem, right? I don't want to look silly because that's going to be a career limiting move for me. So it's a perceived risk, I think, problem.
Sure. Yeah. Or even self-assessing in that regard, not even just like the
Right.
actual consideration, but when you're
Right.
trying to think about this. So you've just mentioned just under 1,000 folks. Let's swing over to that. Like, tell us about that process where you brought all this stuff together. How did you go about it? Tell us about the survey or whatever tools you were using.
Yeah. So we took that experience of helping this group of 30 facilitators in the train the trainer experience, and we prototyped a set of statements, again connected to competencies, and people self-score. So the first prototype was paper-based. We played with that for about a year, and then we built an online software tool that made it an online experience for folks. So we have 14 statements for each of the personas, and we decided to split them. So there's 7 statements for the sensei that are about your mindset, your beliefs, your assumption about the role of the sensei. And then we have 7 statements that measure your behavior, the actions you take as a sensei in a training room. So we map all that out, and then you get a personalized report that gives you your scores and makes some development recommendations. This really is a development tool. It's giving us a language to evaluate the work that we do and how we show up in a training room, and then creates opportunities for us to continue to grow and improve our presence, if you will, how we show up and experiences that we create for others.
Right on. And then all of those survey takers, you were then being able to take everything you observed from those, et cetera, and that kind of fueled some of what you were doing in the book then.
So the learning process for us as we move along in this work, that data set gives us some pretty interesting insights. So here's the other side of the story is 60, almost 2/3 of the time, people name their top strength as the confidant. That's interesting to me.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. So why is that? It's because I think people come to training from a humanistic, right?
That was crossing my mind, and I didn't want to maybe overgeneralize something, but yeah, you don't get into this space if you don't want to try to be helpful.
Right.
And some level of empathy, wanting to be helpful, wanting to help people improve. If you haven't got that, it's probably an indicator that you're not in a great role, or there might be other things that you're better suited for.
Now we're talking about intrinsic motivators for people in learning and development, right? To be of service to others is, I think, a natural instinct for me.
Yeah. What I'm thinking is you've had this whole career of doing this, observing other people doing this type of work. Tell us what's the, I don't even want to use the word worst, but what's the opposite of these examples that you've seen and the effect that it had in the circumstance? What's the worst thing people could do? But an example of something like that you observed.
Yeah, I'm scratching my head because it's a great question. You're making me think deeply about that. I'm not sure that it's a worst, but let's call it the lowest common denominator. I show up in a training room as a participant, and the instructor is transactional. Here's the information you need. Here's the thing to practice. Good luck. I got what I needed at a very basic level, table stakes. I got the information. I got the new model. I got the new process. I understand the skills that I'm being asked to replicate or apply in my job. But I didn't connect with anyone. I don't have a relationship with anyone else in the room. I don't know what other people's perspectives are on this. It feels rather empty and isolated. And I think we have this debate as designers, right? Is this an experience that we need to bring people together for? Or is this information that we can share in a more effective, efficient way? And that debate rages on. My argument is, if we've decided to bring people together, then the role of the facilitator is transformational. It goes way beyond just the transactional pieces that we can share. This is the texture of the experience. It's the culture, the values of the organization. And it's a touch point that tells me about my place in this organization and how I fit in.
Yeah. Our job in the organizational learning and development, organizational training space is really to help people change behaviors. And simply giving them the info doesn't do that.
Right. Back to some wisdom that was shared with me: squeeze their hearts, get their buy-in. You got it. I love it. A facilitator is a catalyst for change. You are in the change business, whether you know it or not. So yeah, that framing is a powerful one. When facilitators start to reorient themselves to that role, 100%.
Very cool. Yeah. The book isn't out yet.
Yeah, available in the US market September 29th.
Okay.
And my latest check on Amazon in Canada, delivery date was expected October the 9th. So a couple days later as it gets across the border.
Yeah, right on. Mo, thank you so much for joining us here today. What a really cool conversation. We've had so many conversations lately, and our tool itself is all about helping folks, typically without a human in the room, e-learning, job aids, other technology-based things. It's been a while since we've had a conversation about just being human, it seems to me. So thanks for joining us and bringing this to us here, gang.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Awesome. And thanks again to the opinions in the chat. Those were fabulous and thoughtful and awesome things to bring to our conversation today. Sure appreciate it. Don't forget, folks, as always, Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee is brought to you by Domino, makers of Domino One, helping L&D teams to develop, scale, and deliver learning that maximizes employee value. Hit up our website, domino.com. Earlier in the spring, we released a report, the State of Learning Content Management 2026 report. That's available on our website if you want to check into some of the insights. It's survey and database. It's not just us blathering on. So check out domino.com for that. And Mo, I think it's time to dance on out of here.
Right on.
Get your moose mug in motion.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.